Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Talbot. I'm Managing Director and Head of Research at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on uranium today. We are going to hear from CanAlaska CEO Cory Belyk. Now, during today's webinar, he will provide an overview and outlook. Then we will take some questions, and you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. We'll get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During this CanAlaska webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of the CanAlaska corporate website, and that can be found on the company's website, canalaska.com. For Red Cloud Securities, I'd highlight this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell. We note this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. So please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on CanAlaska. So with that, Cory, why don't you take it away?
Well, thank you, David, and thank you to Red Cloud. It's a real pleasure today to talk about the CanAlaska story, and the CanAlaska story, specifically how it's evolved since about February of this year when we intercepted our first ultra-high-grade uranium mineralization on our West McArthur project in joint venture with Cameco and what we're calling our Pike Zone. So the talk today will focus obviously on West McArthur. That's been dominating our space for the summer, and we're happy to roll out results here in the last few weeks and into the fall as we get our assays out from our summer drilling program. And, I start this presentation by asking a question. Is it the newest Tier 1 uranium discovery, specifically in the Eastern Athabasca Basin? And hopefully at the end of this presentation, shareholders or potential shareholders will fully understand why we're excited as a company, and why we believe that this, in fact, could be the newest Tier 1 uranium discovery in the Athabasca Basin. So with that, I will work through the presentation. I will be making, as David suggested, some forward-looking statements. This is a slide that you can view on our website or on our current deck. So let's get into this. So how did we start 2024? Well, we had an incredible 2023. We've told this story before. We've been working at the Pike Zone at West McArthur for about a year and a half prior to this year, and we were seeing all the signs, the correct signs of uranium mineralization, open in all directions, the alteration, just incredible. And what we hadn't yet seen was the ultra high-grade uranium, the stuff you find only at Cigar and McArthur, those true Tier 1 assets in the Athabasca model. And we firmly believe, based on what we were seeing, that it should be nearby. So we went through that winter program or winter process of reviewing the data, looking at it, and coming out in Q1 of this year and drilling the best targets. But before we get there, I just want to highlight some of the corporate structure that we currently have. Now, this project at West McArthur is 83.35% owned by CanAlaska. The remaining percentage is owned by our partner Cameco, and they've been involved in this project since about 2016. So the CanAlaska advantage, we put the right strategy with the right team, with the right assets, and good results are coming, specifically at West McArthur. So we're focused on Tier 1 uranium. We've not been shy about that. We know we want to go out and find that Tier 1 deposit. We're not interested in small stuff. We're looking for big stuff. So we put it in the jurisdiction of the Eastern Athabasca Basin. Why? Because it's in and around all of that critical infrastructure owned by Cameco and Orano. 65 million pounds of uranium processing facilities in the Eastern Athabasca Basin. That's where you want to find a Tier 1 asset that can feed that infrastructure down the road. And there's a clear need to feed that infrastructure down the road, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But putting all that together with the right team that knows how to do it, that's done it before, been part of the big companies like Cameco and Orano, and know how to find these deposits, been trained by these companies, results in great discoveries. Now, our assets, we've been around 20 years in the Athabasca Basin. We've got over 500,000 hectares of land in the Eastern Athabasca Basin, principally with partners in Cameco and Denison on various projects, specifically Cameco at West McArthur. And we are well structured and well financed to achieve everything we want to achieve in 2024 and moving into 2025. So let's look at that structure. So as of yesterday, our stock was at 69 cents. We've got 163 million shares outstanding, 270 million fully diluted. Our market cap is hovering just north of 110 million, depending on the day. And importantly, we've got $11.5 million in the bank. So we are well capitalized. We've got a lot of money in the bank to continue to do what we want to do in 2024 and moving into 2025. Uranium market is holding steady, just north of $80 a pound US on the spot. That's sort of a benchmark. That's just a benchmark, and I believe it's going to move quite a bit higher. Our stock has been very stable through the summer on the back of these great results we're going to look at today, and has been moving more recently upward in trend, which is a great result for our company and a great result for our shareholders. So we've seen a bit of a change in the last 6 months. We've seen retail becoming less and less a part of our holdings. It's been moving into the institutions. And that's a normal part of the evolution, I believe, of the company. As we drill these types of results, the institutions start to take more notice and start to increase their ownership. So we are slowly transitioning over to an institution, let's say, dominated registry at some point. So myself, I've been in the space 30 years, mostly with Cameco. For those that don't know me, about 25 years with Cameco prior to joining CanAlaska about 5.5 years ago to move this company forward. I brought along about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago now, Nathan Bridge. He joined me from Cameco and known him a long time, very talented young geoscientist. And together we've been rebuilding the CanAlaska team here in Saskatoon, really geared towards going out and making discoveries like we are at Pike Zone in the last few months. So a testament to his team to be out there doing it. At our board level, we've recently changed the chair position. Karen Lloyd joined us a few years ago at the board level, but now she's chairing the company. She brings a wealth of experience from her Cameco marketing days, where she used to move the uranium around for Cameco around the world into contracts. Also brought on Jeff Gay a few years ago, connections into Indigenous groups in the north where we operate. And then recently we added Shane Shirkliff to the board, again, ex-Cameco marketing corporate development. So a lot of experience here, over 150 years of uranium discovery and market experience on our board, and we're ready for this upturn that's in front of us and this discovery at Pike Zone. Market fundamentals, I've talked about this before. Small modular reactors are, in my view, a game changer. I give a couple of examples in Canada, one being Darlington, where they're putting in 300 megawatts of SMR technology to fuel 300,000 homes in Ontario with clean energy. And what this all requires, when this happens on a global scale, is even more uranium to be found and put into market to support this infrastructure. Now, the uranium price is moving. It's come off a little bit, down to about $80 a pound, but I'm not shy about stating clearly that we're moving into a step change environment where I believe it needs to be somewhere between $90 to $120 or $125 a pound sustained in order to incentivize new exploration, new discovery, new mine builds, those tier 2 assets that are around the world that can help supply a piece of this future need of fuel. That price simply has to move higher than 81.75 of today. It needs to move up into that blue box or higher in a sustained way. And part of that sustainment really is looking at long-term contracting. And this is what I really focus on. Spot price is sexy, it moves around, but long-term contracting is the key. And this is something that's been missing post-Fukushima from the market. It's come back. Just in the last number of months, the long-term contract, the 10-year contracts have moved from the low 60s to now $80 a pound and show no signs of stopping. So, this is what is going to incentivize the long-term builds and new production out there to support what is a clear need for new uranium sources. That need is climbing. AI, as one example. Artificial intelligence, a huge consumer of energy, and it shouldn't be fossil fuel energy. It needs to be clean energy, and it can't be supplied solely by solar or wind. It needs to be nuclear as baseload energy. And you've seen just recently in the news, Constellation plans to restart one of the 3 Mile Island units. Why? Because Microsoft needs clean energy for its data center. You've seen Amazon moving towards using nuclear energy to support its data centers. AI is going to need clean energy like nuclear in order to supply its energy needs. So this is all coming down the pipe. We're in the early stages of what I believe is a multi-decade uranium build-out. And what that means is we need a multi-decade mine build and discovery story or stories in order to feed all of this incoming demand that we see in front of us for the next few decades. So this is where CanAlaska comes in. We're an active explorer and project generator. We pride ourselves on researching, acquiring, doing deals, ultimately all geared towards discovery. We've got over 500,000 hectares in the Eastern Athabasca Basin around all that critical mine and mill infrastructure. And part of our business model, that being the project generation and deal making, brings in other money from different sources. So it allows us to sort of manage or minimize our shareholder dilution, allowing us to focus on things like West McArthur, where we're having great success, and maximize capital gain on discovery by any of our partners. When they go out and make a discovery, we tend to own a residual percentage of the project. We may own a large percentage of the company, and we take cash along the way. So, and as well as royalties. So this is part of our business model. We deployed very successfully. So what we've been doing in 2024 is a fairly aggressive plan at West McArthur, 7.5 million. We're through that now. We just finished drilling there, and we're getting results out to market. But that is our flagship project, West McArthur, and you're going to see in a few moments why that is. We've also got other projects in partnership with Denison, like Moon Lake South, where we're currently drilling there on a supplemental budget based on some work from the winter that needed follow-up this fall. And then we have other partners, sole-funded projects like at Geeky or Waterbury East, which we just announced today, drilling happening in other pieces of our portfolio, which are sole-funded by partnerships as they earn into these projects. So this is part of what we've been doing in 2024, and I would say with great success. So we've had a lot of drilling this year. We came through a very busy winter. We moved into the summer and fall. Like I said, we focused on West McArthur through the summer, and we just finished that drilling program. We've got drills turning right now at Moon Lake South and Waterbury East. We've got a lot of news flow coming from these drilling programs over the next couple of months as we move into the early winter stages and gearing up again for 2025. And we'll, of course, look for deals along the way. So let's look at the portfolio. Our portfolio spans everything from shallow mid-depth to deep targets. Deep targets like McArthur River, Cigar Lake in the mid-depth range. Shallow targets more like Eagle Point or Arrow. But what we get in terms of advantage for deep targets like at West McArthur is we get large alteration halos with these big mineralizing events. We can use that to our advantage. Several hundred meters of target space to vector into what is a very small high-grade uranium target like you might find at McArthur or Cigar Lake. So we can use that. Think of it like a dartboard. We get to play with the whole dartboard looking for the red center versus just looking for the red center. So, it is a way that we can use it to our advantage to go out and make these discoveries in the deeper sandstone cover. So it doesn't scare us, given our backgrounds from Cameco and Orano as a team. So here we are at the Pike Zone. It's located about 12 kilometers west of the McArthur River mine. McArthur shown here on the right. That's a mine of 750 million pounds of uranium. It's been producing for many years. It has about 14 years of mine life left. On the right, you see the haul road down to the Key Lake Mill. We are that close to the critical infrastructure in the Eastern Athabasca Basin. Now, we can drive here year-round from the McArthur River mine gate. We turn off, we follow drill roads in, and we can actually work here year-round if we so choose. So we are ideally situated up against that infrastructure, and any discovery that we can make at West McArthur, like Pike Zone, should get an automatic re-rate because of its proximity to this infrastructure. So the C10 South corridor is part of the C10 corridor. It's already host to Cameco and Orano's nearby Fox Lake deposit, 70 million pounds at 8% average grade. It's host to our 42 zone where we drill grades as high as 8%. But now we're into that ultra high grade uranium at Pike Zone. It truly is the Eastern Athabasca Basin's newest high grade uranium discovery. So how did we enter the summer? Well, we came off the back of some incredible results from the winter program that we announced in March and April and assays in early June, where we drilled almost 15 meters of 10% uranium, followed up by 10 meters of 15% uranium in and around the unconformity. So this is that ultra high grade uranium mineralization that looks like a Cigar Lake or McArthur River analog. And I'm going to talk more about McArthur River as we move through this presentation because this is truly what it's starting to look like. So we entered the summer early June, wanting to follow up these results, partly to close the current section, understand its limits on section, but then to move out into the third dimension and follow it along strike and see if those ultra high grades could grow and grow exponentially, perhaps nearby. So that's how we entered it. We also were testing for additional mineralization, additional pearls along the string. You've heard that terminology before. Additional pearls of ultra high grade uranium nearby. And that was a focus for us this summer. Our very first hole that we announced in the summer program, following up on section, drilled 21.6 meters at 3.44% EU through it. That's equivalent grade, so that's from our calibrated probes, followed up by assay coming soon, including a section of 5.5 meters of almost 11% uranium. So again, ultra high grade uranium in and around the unconformity, just an incredible result to start the summer. Then we did our first drill hole off section. Our first drill hole off section, again, working on that third dimension, stepping out. Our first drill hole off section, the second hole of the summer, drilled almost 17 meters of 7% uranium, including almost 10 meters of 12% uranium, 45 meters down the structure into the basement. Here's the deep, high-grade basement roots lying underneath that unconforming mineralization on strike. So this is a great indication that we're onto something that truly does have a third dimension to it of significantly ultra-high-grade uranium mineralization. So that was an incredible second hole. This is what it looked like, black. Why is it black? It's nearly in places 100% replacement with uraninite or pitch blende. That is incredibly dense uranium mineralization, 45 meters below the unconformity. You can imagine it connects up to the unconforming mineralization and sees deep roots that make things like McArthur River special. Deep roots connected to that unconforming mineralization. So we were ecstatic. This was an incredible first step out hole for us early in the summer. We continued to follow that up all summer. So the rest of that section, we continued to drill ultra high grade uranium, over 16 meters of almost 10% uranium near the unconformity and almost 26 meters of 5% uranium. Again, there's higher grades in here. Within that 25%, you get over 16 meters of 7% or 6.5% grade uranium. And there's even higher grades within that we'll report later through assay. You're getting 11 meters of almost 13% uranium. This is that ultra high grade uranium continuing on the adjacent section to the one that we reported from the winter. So here's that third dimension starting to form up. This is no longer a 1 or 2 hole wonder. This is now multiple holes of ultra high grade uranium at the unconformity, extending deep into the basement, but still connected to the unconformity, just like you find at Zone 2 at McArthur River. So we were getting excited when we started to drill these results. And this is what it continued to look like. Again, all that beautiful yellow, orange, black, just high grade mineralization at that unconformity, extending down into the basement. This is exactly what you want to see when you start to talk about a tier 1 uranium asset. There's an incredible amount of metal contained in these intercepts, and you can build a resource very quickly when you drill grades north of 10% uranium over significant width. It's just, this is what it needs to look like to be in a tier 1 setting. Now, tier 1 settings in the Athabasca Basin also come as pearls on a string. Pearls on a string. You've heard others talk about that. We've talked about it. We went out and we tested 100 meters to the west of where we're drilling what we just talked about, that ultra high grade uranium, and we hit more ultra high grade uranium in a new area. 2 meters of almost 23%, almost 24% uranium at the unconformities. It's just incredible results coming from a new area. So this is truly potentially another pearl shaping up just 100 meters away. There's even potential that this is connected to the mineralization we just finished talking about. Between these, we've only got a couple of holes. We may have actually overstepped the ultra high grade uranium on these in this area. So this could all be connected. This is an incredible result. One of the things we wanted to do was show that we have another pearl forming up, another one of these ultra high grade uranium zones nearby that truly start to make this special. And when you drill grades and thicknesses like we're seeing, that truly is game changer for this Pike Zone area. It's truly a game changer for CanAlaska. And this is how we finished the summer program. So these are all radiometric results. They will be confirmed through assay. And again, assays will be coming in the next few weeks, several weeks, as we roll this out to our shareholders so they understand that what we're showing you is in fact incredibly, incredibly rich in uranium. This is what the new pearl looks like. Again, ideally situated at the unconformity, completely open in both directions and down into the basement. This is, again, an incredible outcome from the later stage of our summer program, and this will be a focus when it comes time to drill here again in the first week of January. So just in summary, this is the summer program. We added numerous holes, significant expansion to the ultra high grade uranium that we reported earlier in the winter. We've expanded it successfully through the summer. We are going to be out here drilling again with 2 drills in this immediate area in early 2025, probably about the first week. And we're going to anticipate having a 3rd rig working outward again, looking for yet a 3rd pearl, not too far away in particular to the west here. But it is completely open in both directions. It's completely open down into the basement. But we are now really focused at the unconformity in the upper basement where we're seeing all this incredible mineralization occurring that truly looks like a Zone 2 at McArthur analog. Now, we're talking a lot about McArthur in Zone 2. Why? Because this is what it's starting to look like. Zone 2 at McArthur River is host to 350 million pounds of uranium. Half the deposit sits in this tiny little target. Now, to put that into perspective, Zone 2, 350 million pounds of uranium, it's the size, or less than the size, of a North American football field. It's 80 meters in strike length, it's about 20 to 25 meters wide, and it goes down into the basement up to 70 meters. An incredibly small target fits in the size of a North American football field. This is the type of grade and thickness that we're drilling currently at Pike Zone. This is why we're excited that even if we have, half of a Zone 2, you're still looking at pushing 200 million pounds of uranium in that small space. Now, let's put that into context. If we just simply take that 80 meter strike length, 20 to 25 meter width, down into the basement 60 or 70 meters, and put it into something that can show you the scale that we're operating at, this is it. One of these red boxes in the middle diagram here, that's 80 meters of strike length. We've already filled half of one of those boxes with uranium. Okay, we've already filled half of a Zone 2 analog with grades of 10 and 15%. Incredible, incredible stuff. And we've also started to work on a second Zone 2 analog to the west that we just talked about. Again, hitting very high grade mineralization at the unconformity. This is going to be a focus when we come back in early January. We're going to have one drill on each of these boxes. We're going to fill it up with drill holes over the course of about 4 months. Imagine what can happen if these types of ultra high grade uranium intercepts continue to fill that red box, which again, I highlight, is equivalent to the scale of Zone 2 at McArthur River. So this is what's in front of us. This is what we're going to get back to. This is why we're excited, because it looks right. It's got the right width. It's got the right grade. It's got the right scale. It's got the right openness to actually make this a tier 1 asset in 2025. So it's expanding. It's growing. It's got openness to it, and we are very excited with the results we've seen to date. Now, how are we doing this at 750 meters depth, or just deeper than McArthur, just a little bit deeper than McArthur River? We're using deviation technology. We're using a directional mud motor. This is a picture of it from the field on the right. So we basically drill one pilot hole, and then we offcut from that. It looks like a spider web. And there's daughters, there's granddaughters, there's all sorts of different offcuts here to actually target. What we're doing, in essence, is taking 800 meter depth and turning it into 300 meter depth. We have gotten so efficient, the team has gotten so efficient at using this technology that our drilling rates are cheaper than most others working in the Athabasca Basin outside of its margin without sandstone cover. That is how effective this technology has been for us. In fact, we haven't moved that drill in the foreground since February 1st of this year. We're on the same drill setup. What you're looking at here is our drilling footprint for the last 2 years. And we are not moving these drills in the near term. We're going to continue to drill there starting in January. This is the advantage that CanAlaska and its team brings. We know how to deploy this technology to bring down cost. Last year alone, we optimized $1.25 million in drilling for our shareholders. We've reduced the environmental footprint, which allows us to have our social license to operate up here. You can see the results. It's very little impact on the environment for 2 years of work. Our geoscientists plan and execute these drill holes. They plan and execute these offcuts. It's done in-house. That's the advantage that CanAlaska and its team brings to this project. So in the context of why are we in the Eastern Athabasca Basin? Well, it's simple. Cameco has a reserve depletion problem. This is from their website. This is their data. When they ramp up to 25 million pounds per year in 2025, they've got about 14 years of mine life left in their reserve. There is no other reserve at McArthur River. Cameco spent 5 years looking. There's no more there. What they know is what they know. So in 14 years' time, the Key Lake mill will need feed. The next best asset that Cameco has in its pipeline in the southeastern Athabasca Basin near Key Lake is Millennium. And that's about a 100 million pound deposit at an average grade of 2.6 to 2.8% at about 600 to 700 meters depth. I dare say that the Pike Zone is already looking better than that. And when we prove it up and we drill some more holes here in early 2025, I think it's quickly going to become the front runner in the southeastern part of the Athabasca Basin that could feed the Key Lake mill down the road. Our partner Cameco has a need. We've got the asset that potentially can help them solve that problem. It's an incredible position to be in. It's a strategic opportunity for our shareholders to be in and around and get re-rated appropriately for any discovery that can be made in and around that infrastructure. So in terms of new exploration opportunities, we're always project generating. In the last number of months to a year, we've done a number of deals, about $44 million in recent deals, some of which are drilling today at Waterbury East, for example. This is all to move other parts of our portfolio forward. So this is one way that we control dilution. We can't do it all. So it's a 500,000 hectare land portfolio that we just can't do everything on, and we want to stay focused at West McArthur. So this is one way that we manage our dilution, provide opportunity for additional discovery within our portfolio on projects that we've generated over the last number of years. So it's part of our business. It's bringing value to our shareholders, and every drill hole you drill has a chance to go out and make that discovery. So with that, CanAlaska, we believe, ticks all the boxes. And the most important box here is that we are advancing a new ultra-high-grade uranium discovery. This is not a zombie project. This is brand new mineralization. And importantly, as of 6 months ago, it is a brand new ultra-high-grade uranium discovery at Pike Zone. And we couldn't be more excited to bring this to our shareholders at the close of our summer programs, because we truly do believe that this is the newest Tier 1 uranium discovery, and it's well positioned to take advantage of what is an incredible uranium market in front of us, and it couldn't be better timed in terms of need for the infrastructure in the Eastern Athabasca Basin to have feed for Key Lake. So it is well positioned, it's got the right look, it's got the right feel, it's got the right smell. This is what we believe to be the next Tier 1 uranium discovery at Pike Zone. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cory. And having the right smell is actually real, right? You can smell the high grade.
It is actually real, David. It smells like, I put it in the context of steamed Brussels sprouts or broccoli, and many people have different descriptors for it. But when you get reports from the field that they open up the core in the core shack and they got to air it out for a day because it smells so strong, it's just a very characteristic smell when you're in these high grades. It's just an amazing outcome that is one of the lead indicators, the smell. And if you have return at a drill when you're drilling this stuff, you can actually smell it at the drill collar. Right. It's incredible.
No, that's good. My 10 years in the bush and the gold industry, the only smell you worry about is the guy next to you. Anyways, moving on here. What's your take? I guess let's start bigger picture here. What's your take on the current equity market sentiment that we have in the uranium sector? Price is really in fairly good shape. It's maybe not showing that much directionality at $80, but it's certainly higher than we are used to in the past years. So, nuclear power has a lot of support from governments, even environmentalists. But the uranium companies just don't seem to be sharing the benefit now. So do you have maybe an answer for us, a reason why investors are a little bit more complacent these days?
Well, I think I have speculation, but I'll provide what I can speculate or what I think I can speculate. I think we came through a very slow summer. I think we came through a very soft summer in almost all spaces, and uranium was no different. I will say that CanAlaska amongst its peers held its own, if not climbed, through that period when others were falling quite drastically. So I'd say the results from Pike Zone were recognized, but I didn't see a lot of added on support, let's call it, for the story. But I think that's coming back. I'm seeing signs of it now, and I think what we're about to see here is a repeat of what we saw earlier this year, where the price of uranium is set to spike. And I look at it and I go, why is that? Because everything is positive. There's been no negatives in the uranium space. Those fundamentals we talked about 12 months ago are still present. And now they've strengthened even more, like I talked about with the AI and the data center stuff and the support that you're now getting from those companies, to actually go and use nuclear energy for their big energy needs and have to be off fossil fuels. It has to be nuclear, and they're recognizing that fact. You've got government support, as you indicate. You've got now, regional support, whether it's North America or Europe or others. You're even hearing about it in Australia, remarkably, which is remarkable. So, it's just, I've talked about this before. It's winding up like a spring again, and I think, late Q4, Q1 next year is going to be a special time where we're going to see that finally move back up and stabilize. 80 is not enough. 80 is not high enough for spot price, but term contracting is moving. And if you watch the term contracting, it's a steady process up. And why? Because utilities are starting to get nervous. Where's the next supply going to come from? Where's their uranium going to come from, their fuel for their reactors, for the utilities? I mean, that's all laying out there. And layer in geopolitics. You sandwich Kazakhstan between China and Russia. that's a problem waiting to happen. And we've seen what's happened in Africa more recently. So, it's all just winding tighter. And, that re-rate in the uranium price, just like our stock prices, that re-rate in the uranium price is right in front of us. And juniors like us and others will respond to the positive when that happens. And those with the best story will re-rate yet again, in my view. And I like to think CanAlaska has one of the better stories out there at present. You just don't drill this type of uranium anywhere on the planet, let alone even in the Athabasca Basin, in any big way. And here we are in a big way through the summer drilling just that. So it's a special time for CanAlaska.
Yeah, absolutely. AI, it's amazing how much influence and the media and the public get from the tech industry. So, okay, moving on here. Your Pike Zone discovery, I think it was late 2022 or so, was down in the basement. What suggested then that you might see something at the unconformity, which is, the contact between the basement and the overlying sandstone? Because, you going after something actually led to your 2024 discovery, in ultra high grade discovery at the unconformity.
Oh, absolutely, David. We in 2022 we were well under the unconformity. That we were probably 100 and 150 meters below the unconformity. We're chasing it up to the unconformity, and we finally got there in 2023. Really, and we tested the unconformity. We got mineralization of the unconformity, but we weren't getting the ultra high grade uranium that you want to see at a Cigar McArthur or tier 1 type analog, specifically at the depth of sandstone in McArthur River. So, we knew we were in and around something special, because the alteration we're seeing in the basement, the alteration we're seeing in the sandstone, the alteration we're seeing, the evidence of the fluid movement that carries this uranium was all through the rocks. And when we went away in late 2023, the team sort of digested it over the break, and they came out in February and they said, look, everything is pointing us to this area we haven't drilled as being the best potential. All the structure, all the analysis they've done, the chemistry, and they went out and they drilled that first hole. And that very first hole is the one that hit the ultra high grade uranium, right where they figured it should be, based on everything we're seeing around it at the unconformity. Then we followed it up, of course, with more ultra high grade, and that's sort of where we ended the winter. So then, of course, we start thinking about pearls on a string concept that we've talked about often, and there should be another one around. These are very rarely, one-offs, especially when you see this level of mineralization. So that really led us through the summer, where we continued to build out what we knew, but then we stepped out and tested away from it to go, okay, what about here? And, when we were out there in June, we looked at a hole that was about 70 or 80 meters down into the base, and we said, look, this is out to the west. This hole intersected the fault. It intersected the right geology, intersected alteration in chemistry that looks every bit like what we saw underneath the ultra high grade that we drilled in the winter, and went, gee, we're going to drill out here. And that's exactly where that second pearl is showing up. When you chase it up to the unconformity, bang, there it is, 2 meters, 23-24% uranium at the unconformity, part of a bigger zone of mineralization along that structure. But everything we're seeing 70, 80 meters in the basement was pointing us there. We'd never drilled. And there we are. We've proven that concept. Now, we haven't drilled for 1,000 meters to the west. We don't have a single drill hole on trend here for 1,000 meters to the west. What if there's more pearls laying out there? And I think that's the exciting part of 2025 as we continue with that third drill to look elsewhere along the trend. Imagine a scenario where we find a third or fourth or fifth pearl here. Now you're truly having a very different conversation, literally 6 months from January 1st.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. And why are we seeing the ultra high grade there at the unconformity? What is it about that spot that really makes it interesting? And do you have any idea what the average grade of the deposit might be? I know we've only got 12 intersections through the unconformity right now, but I think it already looks higher than, let's say, RRR Arrow. Should we be expecting something like Fox Lake, 8%? More or less?
Well, Fox Lake would be less than Arrow and less than RRR. So, our hope, our intent is to be significantly bigger than Fox Lake. And right now, I would say it's got all the earmarks of potentially being bigger than Fox Lake. I think the imagery we're trying to show is that, all the grade and thickness and space that we're drilling right now is lining up to look more and more like one of the big zones at McArthur River, one of which is half the deposit. And that's why we tell that story. It looks like a zone 2 type analog where you've got 10 or 15 meters of 10 or 15%. Yes, there's lower grades in and around that or on adjacent holes. That occurs at McArthur River as well. Okay, that absolutely occurs at McArthur River as well. It's not consistent. So the schematic we show is purely to say, okay, we're drilling those types of grades, those types of thicknesses. We've got room to grow this way beyond, 100 meters, 200 meters, heck, way beyond a kilometer. It's not going to be that. It's going to be multiple pearls. But the point is, this is looking big. So what makes it special? What makes it special and why the mineralization is there is because structures interacting, more than two, but let's just use that as an example. Two structures interacting, you create the open space. You create the open space to deposit the uranium at that unconformity. Without that structural enhancement, you simply don't have the room to make a big deposit. And we're seeing exactly that type of scenario happening at Pike Zone. And that's what makes it special, is that you've got the structure showing up. We've now identified an offset of about 15 meters, maybe more in other places, at the unconformity, which is just testament to the scale of the structure and the ability for it to generate space to drop in uranium. These are all the signposts you need to see to say you're onto something special. Couple that with the alteration, extreme alteration that we're seeing in the sandstone down in the basement, hundreds of meters into the basement even. That tells you you're in a big mineralizing event. This truly does have the fingerprint of a tier 1 asset. And when we start drilling grades for ultra high grade uranium over very significant width, akin to one of the zones of McArthur River, you're onto something special, David. You're really onto something special.
Yeah, no, I believe it. Now you have ultra high grade on 4 sections, sort of 2 pairs separated by about 100 meters or so. In your press release, you talk about 2 pods. What makes you think these are separate pods, separate zones, and not the same zone at this point?
Well, actually, we don't actually know that yet. So, we've got a few holes between on one section. Literally one section, and one of those holes was, I think, 6 meters of 1%. So really good grade anywhere else in the Athabasca Basin. Here, not what we're looking for, not tier 1. However, all of these deposits have holes in them between the pods. You might actually get no uranium, and you move over 10 meters, and you're back into 10 meters at 15%. That is how these things form. So for now, we're assuming it's two separate pods. Part of the 2025 program, we'll look at between them as well to see if they actually are connected. Because like I said in the presentation, we may have actually stepped over the ultra high grade uranium, not even knowing it's there. We got to go back and fill that in. We've got to go back and look. And now we've learned even more information about the structural controls. So we can actually pinpoint best places between these two, for now, pods, whereby we may actually prove or disprove that theory. And we're going to go in there in 2025, and we're going to do just that, as well as work along strike. So this can grow very fast. David, and they may actually be connected, but for now we're talking as if they're 2 pods. I would prefer they're actually connected, because then you have even more mineralization in that space, and that would be an ideal scenario, but we'll see.
Yeah, so you sort of half answered my next question. You've got mineralization that's wide open right now in both pods, if you will, but how do you test those next winter? Do you test along strike? Do you test up and down dip? How far do you step out? You said you're open for 1,000 meters to the west.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's put it this way: we don't actually have to move those drills to get to a tier 1 asset now. Given the grades and thicknesses that we're drilling in that confined space, I've tried to show the audience that this looks every bit like one of the zones at McArthur, specifically a zone 2 type analog. I put that scale there for a purpose, because we can literally drill all year from those 2 drill pads and fill both those red boxes with ultra high grade uranium. And if we do that, we're having an extremely different conversation in 6 months. Now, the third rig is going to start stepping out to the west, is the initial plan, looking again for another pod to shape up, or an extension of the continued mineralization. We'll see where it goes. But again, stepping out maybe 50, 100 meters, maybe further, working our way out, going, okay, are we in the best part of this mineralizing event? We may not actually be in the best part of this mineralizing event yet. We don't know that, because we haven't drilled for 1,000 meters to the west. So what guides us along that 1,000 meters? Well, we don't know 1,000 meters out, but if we look a few hundred meters to the west, everything we're seeing in the sandstone, the upper sandstone in that new area that we talked about on the western side, that new pod, everything back in the hang wall, in the sandstone, is pointing us downtrend to the west, maybe 100 meters or 200 meters away. It's pointing us there. And that has us really excited because we don't have a single drill hole there. But what we've learned at the other ultra-high grade portion of this trend, the first part that we released in the winter, is that the structural complexity is the key. So we're projecting structures to the west from knowledge of where we're drilling today we haven't even put a hole into. So that's really exciting, because when you put that all together, you could have another pod or an extension of that ultra high grade uranium just 100 meters away. And that's exciting. That's really exciting.
Yeah. You keep mentioning Zone 2 McArthur River, a Tier 1 asset, a Tier 1 deposit. What classifies a deposit as being a Tier 1 deposit?
Well, I mean, that changes where you are in the basin. But, as I've said before many times, is that we're focused on making a Tier 1 discovery at West McArthur. Why Tier 1? Because Tier 2 it probably doesn't work. So Tier 1, generally you got to be north of 100 million pounds in a small space with a good grade. Okay, let's just start there. And obviously from that point, the bigger the better. Drilling grades of 5, 10, 15%, anywhere in that range, and you start thinking about averaging that over that very small space, that is Zone 2 at McArthur River. And that is host to 350 million pounds of uranium in the size of a football field. So we are drilling grades that look every bit like Zone 2 at McArthur River. We've got more drilling to do. We've only filled half of one of those boxes when we've only started working on the second one. But imagine if we drill in the first 3 or 4 months, similar types of grades, intersections at the unconformity, fill the rest of that red box. We don't know how long it's going to be, but fill the rest of that red box, fill a bunch on the other one. I mean, you are having a Tier 1 conversation, because the grade is there, the thickness is there, contained metal is clearly there. And, that little red box at McArthur River is host to something the size of Arrow. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're drilling today in terms of our grades and thicknesses and the space that we have open to make this bigger in the first 2 quarters of next year. And, that's why Tier 1, it needs to be big in a small space at a good grade. And that's exactly what we have in front of us.
Okay. So you've wrapped up drilling here. Assays are pending still. What sort of catalyst should we expect over the next 4 months until we see drilling get back and at it next year?
Well, I mean, assays. I mean, we haven't yet received assays from any of the summer work. They are starting to come in. So we will look at clearing the deck on the assays. Basically, I would anticipate it's going to confirm our radiometric estimates. We're the only junior that does equivalent grade estimates because we come from chemical and orano backgrounds, so we're comfortable handling that. We now have the ultra high grade uranium in our database that can allow us to tighten that mathematical curve, which we've talked about before. That's all narrowing in on a focus, and we can very clearly estimate these grades. So, assay confirmation, I think, is important for the market, just to say, yeah, okay, your data is real. Well, it's going to confirm. And we'll get that out over the next, say, 6 weeks or so. The first results should be coming out in a week or two, and we'll work through the process of getting that out to market. So that'll carry us into sort of late October, let's say. And then sort of in November, we'll set the budget for 2025 with our partner Cameco. And then usually in December, we put the announcement out as to our plans for 2025. So the budget, the plan, I've just told you the plan. We're going to drill ultra high grade uranium mineralization again at Pike Zone and expand that. Clearly it's open. So we'll be back out there first week of January with 2 drills. Somewhere later in Q1, we're going to add the 3rd drill. And those 3 drills are going to work as long as we can work into probably Q2. Results will be forthcoming all through January, February, March, probably April, and into May from what we do next winter. So we got a ton of news flow coming out of West McArthur over the next 6 to 8 months, all geared towards, hopefully, in the back half of next year, trying to put out the first resource number. Assuming this continues to grow as we anticipate it will, as I've tried to show you, we will look at trying to get our first resource number out the door in the back half of next year. We're doing all the front-end geoscience work, the density work on this core. I mean, as you can imagine, that extremely high-grade stuff, mineralization is extremely dense. Imagine holding something heavier than lead in your hand for core. It's just phenomenal. And we couldn't be more excited about where we can take this. And we're doing all that front end work. We got an independent party contracted looking at our database, essentially an outside QP. We're going to be ready to roll with that first resource as soon as we figure we're ready. And that could be later half of next year.
Yeah. You talked about your Cameco background and releasing probe results. You're using a new calibrated gamma log probe this year. How do you believe using this tool has worked this year versus last? And are you really anticipating assays to come in very similar to your drill results, your gamma probe results?
Well, we did order a new probe last year. Came in from France, calibrated. So we do have a new probe. We're running essentially 3 probes on every hole. So we're collecting all this data and we're comparing everything together. But the one of the things we had to go through the winter and the spring was actually getting the assays back from the ultra high grade mineralization, because the probes can saturate. They saturate very heavily. So one of the things we needed to do is get the ultra high grade assays back, which we've done, and there's more to come, but that helps us tighten our curves down. So we take the variance out of it and we can actually narrow it down, and it gives us a lot more confidence. Now, most don't know how to handle this data. Most don't know how to handle calibrated probing calculations. We do, because that's our background. So we don't like putting out just a handheld scintillometer number on some core that tells you nothing. We're actually giving you what we believe is the most accurate information at the time from our probing data, and we're comfortable handling it. And every ultra high grade hole we drill, produce assays from, goes back into that mathematical calculation to actually verify the results. So we get better and better and better at actually estimating this data. And as we saw in the spring, there was some variance, but in general, it confirmed. I would expect the confirmations to be even better as we move through the summer assays and reporting those results. So I think we're in pretty good shape, David. We're good.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I loathe dealing with scintillometer results
Yes.
for probe or assays. So you talked about maybe a resource estimate later next year. Can you talk to us a little bit about specific gravity? Obviously, uranium is very, very dense. And the higher the grade, the more pounds you add to that deposit, even without expanding the size of it. Have you been taking SG measurements up to this point? And what can high grades do to the SG? How does that potentially impact resources?
So one of the things you do need, as I think you know, is in order to do a resource calculation, you have to have accurate, specific gravity data. And that takes density work on your core, specifically your ultra high grade mineralization like we're seeing. You need to do the density work. So you can make assumptions, and everyone out there will be trying to do the back of the envelope calculations, but they don't know the densities. They're only making assumptions on the density. Some of this material that we're drilling here is extremely rare to drill. And some of it is heavier than lead. Like, it is really dense stuff. So just imagine holding that in your hands, and we do. So we're doing all that work. So that allows, when you come time to do the resource, you got to plug that variance in density through your mineralization to actually accurately calculate the amount of metal that you have contained within that resource block. So we're doing all that work up front, getting it in our database, getting it scrubbed by the independent party, so that when we're ready to actually generate that first number, we should be able to do it relatively quickly. And that's what we're trying to gear ourselves up by middle of next year, is that we're able to actually go out and potentially, put that first number out, which, in my view, will re-rate our stock. It will re-rate our stock. I mean, if we truly have 100 million pounds or more defined by middle of next year, recent deals out there suggest that should be valued at about $8 a pound in the ground US, which puts us at about $1 billion market cap. Forward-looking statement, I know. However, we should not be a 100 million market cap company even today. We are. And I think the runway in front of us is incredible. And all this gravity work, to your point, will allow us to put the first resource out as soon as possible to be able to re-rate that stock appropriately to market. So yeah, we're doing all that front end work, David. And some of these densities, you're looking at densities, careful what I say, but you're looking at densities in excess of 5 and higher. That's just the way this stuff is, and it's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, as opposed to, let's say, 2.7, which is typical average.
Yeah, there's depending on the rock you're in, it can vary from 2.3, 2.5, 2.7, but in that lower range, this stuff will have a much higher specific gravity, and that is something that I think people trying to do back of the envelope estimates don't have in their back pocket, where we do. So that's the piece that's missing when you start to try and figure out numbers on this.
It's as important as grade when it comes
absolutely grade, and you need the density.
Yeah. So now, Cory, you said you need to sit down and determine budgets for next year, especially at JVs. What was your budget this year for West McArthur, and do you think you're going to match it or beat it next year?
Well, our budget this year was $7.5 million, and we've shut our program down now because we've drilled $7.5 million worth of work this year. So, we're done. We're now in the process with our partner Cameco in approving the program and budget for 2025. I can't release that number to market, but I think it's safe to say that it will be higher than $7.5 million based on the results and based on the fact that I just told you we're going to go with 3 drills next year. Mm-hmm. So we are going to pick up the pace. We are going to look to define, again, all geared towards trying to get to the first resource number as fast as possible. And that all is going to take more drilling. And, we have to drill the holes. We have to get the results, and we don't know that until we know it. So we're going to pick up the pace a little bit, but we're going to do it in a way that isn't wasteful for our shareholders. We can manage 3 drills. We have to expand our camp, but we're going to manage 3 drills fairly well. Anything higher, we start to waste and make bad decisions. And I've seen a lot of that out there in my career where companies go, we're going to go 6 rigs, and then you make just bad decisions. We're still working through the geology, especially away from these 2 areas. That takes patience, persistence, and that's how we're geared. We're geared to following a methodical approach, trying to get as fast and as cheaply as possible to the answer that we want, and that is trying to generate a first resource. So, I would say the number is going to be higher than 7.5. That's pretty obvious. We will tell the market what that will be when we've run it through our partner Cameco and approved it through the joint venture.
And how many rigs did you have this year?
2.
Okay. So how much cash do you have in the treasury? And then what sort of funding might you seek? Are you looking for equities, offtakes, royalties?
We have $11.5 million in cash in the bank today. We are not starving for capital to enter 2025. I believe we're undervalued in the market, so I'm being patient, and I'm going to wait and see how the market responds through the fall. And we'll go from there as to whether we try and pick up a little extra funding for 2025 this year, or we wait into 2025. We'll see how it goes, David. I don't know. I can't answer that. But, as I tried to articulate, with these results, we should not be a 70-cent stock. And I am fortunate to have the luxury of having $11.5 million in the treasury for CanAlaska, in that I don't have to finance today to get moving in 2025.
Right. Okay. Cameco, your JV partner, has its interest picked up on the project since the discovery of the Pike Zone basement, or even ultra high grade discovery at the Unconformity? What might they do in 2025? Can you tip the hand? They didn't spend anything last year.
Well, they won't tell us until they have to tell us, but that's normal in the industry. But they have been diluting for a number of years, in part because of their economic situation for a number of years. But I think one of the things that led them to not fund this year is the fact that we had yet to show them ultra high grade uranium. Okay, so as a big company, they're always on the lookout for, okay, is this truly another McArthur cigar? Well, by end of February, we'd actually drilled that hole. So I don't know what their intent is for 2025. That'll be their business decision. But what I can say is that when we drill holes like this for CanAlaska shareholders, I'm very happy to take the interest from them in the dilution because they have no clawbacks. So, if we gain 3 or 4% this year, as an example, 3 or 4% through their dilution this year, imagine the potential value of that 3 or 4% if this is a tier 1 asset. I will gladly trade a few $1 million for that percentage when we're drilling holes like this. Now, through the joint venture, Cameco has every ability to rejoin us and co-fund their what will be about 13% interest in the project. I'll gladly accept that. They have always shown interest in the project. That has never been an issue. They've been along with us for the ride. They just haven't been funding, but they do their visits. We have our meetings. They provide their feedback. Every news release that goes out is scrubbed by Cameco, whether they're funding or not. So that should give the market some extra credibility for CanAlaska, and that, Cameco approves our news releases, and that's right from the raw data upward. That's all scrubbed by our big partner. So I don't know what they're going to do in 2025. I would suggest they should fund. But it's their corporate decision. And if they don't fund, I'm very happy to continue to receive their interest in the project through dilution, because this is an extremely rare event. If this is tier one, every percentage is huge money in value to our shareholders, no matter what happens in the future. So, happy to welcome them back. Also happy to work without them. It's a great scenario for CanAlaska.
Yeah. The last question, I guess you touched on a little bit of how hungry those mills might be, Key Lake Mill or even McLean Lake Mill, over the next decade and a half. Sort of using McArthur as a comp, how many years will it take, do you think, to go from your current stage to production?
Yeah, well, I think, that's it's always an estimate. You're guessing a little bit, but I think when you look at the track record, and you only have to look at Arrow as well, it's generally considered to be about 15 years. From discovery or understanding you have that resource that is truly moving toward production, it's about 15 years. So I talk about Cigar and McArthur and that infrastructure in the context of Cigar Lake has 11 years of mine life left. 11 years. Okay, so there's no other tier one asset in the Eastern Athabasca Basin to replace Cigar Lake at the McLean Lake Mill. We've already got the Rabbit Lake Mill sitting idle for a number of years because Eagle Point is essentially low on resource. So there's milling capacity sitting in the northeast of the basin. Now, in the southeast, we've got Key Lake. Its capacity is 25 million pounds per year. Cameco is moving McArthur River up to 25 million pounds per year, which they announced in late January. All that does is move their reserve base forward in time in terms of depletion, and it turns it into a 14-year mine life. There is no other reserve at McArthur River. That is it. So if we found it today, let's assume we found it today, it is still too late to slot in behind McArthur River at the Key Lake Mill. It still has a production problem. So the time is now. The time is now to move this forward. If this is truly tier one, it will displace the only other tier two deposit in this region, that being Millennium. I won't talk about Denison's Phoenix because that's a different scenario. Millennium is the next best asset that could feed Key Lake. That's 104 million pounds at 2.6 to 2.8% average grade at 600 to 700 meters depth. I dare say we're already there. We're close to there, and we will be the preferred asset that could feed Key Lake if Pike Zone continues to deliver the results that we saw through the summer. It's a great scenario for CanAlaskan shareholders, up against all that infrastructure, 12 kilometers from that haul road, straight down to the Key Lake Mill. Amazing story.
Okay. I did promise last question, and we're almost at the top of the hour, but maybe just one more here. Can you maybe comment on your other work, Waterbury, Moon Lake, Key Lake, any drilling that's going on there?
Yeah, so currently we have two drills turning. One drill at Moon Lake South JV with Denison. Denison leads that project. They came through the winter drilling program and geophysics program, and they saw an extension of the conductor that they previously didn't understand existed from that mineralization we announced in later 2022, that 8 meters of 2.5% that they've been trying to follow up unsuccessfully so far. But they identified an extension of that conductor, presumably the structure host to that mineralization that they previously didn't know. So they're out there right now putting a few holes into it just to see what it is. That could be an exciting outcome, because if, these things as pearls on a string, if that intercept is something that's sort of just on the fringe of something that might be just to the south, that's where they're drill testing right now as we speak. So that'll come out in the next few months, and those results, we'll see what they have. The other program we just announced today is our new partnership with Bay Ridge Resources, and they are doing their first drilling program at our Waterbury East project. They flew some new geophysics. It lit up the target even better than we knew. Looks like the drill holes in the past were not quite in the right spot, so they're out there right now starting that drill program. And so they're going to move that project forward. Again, that's our project generation business at work. We're not spending money on Waterbury East. They're going to sink maybe $5 million into that project to move it forward to earn their interest. We get cash and shares along the way and a royalty. Fantastic example of our, project generation business at work where we can move things forward through drilling, not using our shareholders' money, staying focused at West McArthur. So yeah, we got a lot of news coming still from drilling in the fall, independent of West McArthur. And presumably in 2025, we'll have even more work at our Cree East project, perhaps Waterbury East, Constellation. I would anticipate drilling programs from all those companies moving forward in 2025 as well. So we got a lot on the go, David, a lot on the go.
Absolutely. A lot to watch, a lot to work on. So
yep.
Great. Well, thank you, Cory, from CanAlaska for speaking to us today.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you to Red Cloud. It's always a pleasure, and I love telling this story. It's just incredible results, and thank you for your guidance on this through the webinar, and thank you to everybody listening here. I think it's an exceptional story that everyone needs to pay attention to in the uranium space. And thanks again to Red Cloud for everything you've done for CanAlaska along the way. You've helped us get here. So thank you for today.
Okay, thank you. We can tell from your passion you're pretty excited about everything. So great. Well, that's it. Thank you, everybody else, for tuning in. Reminder, the Red Cloud Securities will be back on Monday afternoon when I sit down with Atha Energy. So that's October 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So have a great day, everyone, and thank you for supporting Red Cloud's webinar series.